Hi, my name is Tracy Klarner, and today I'm going to be discussing the impact of social networking and the World Wide Web on political views and discussion. The topic at hand, the impact of social networking and the World Wide Web on political views and discussion, takes into account how new media needs to be considered as a relevant source of communication, and one's political communications and online activities may now be considered civic engagement, whereas in the past they may not necessarily have been considered civic engagement. The level of experience one has with the internet will directly tie into one's activities online and to what degree of communication these activities may be considered. Also, as time progresses, more individuals will become well-versed with computer technology. As this progression occurs, it is likely that more communication and civic engagement will occur online. Communication theories will likely be modified and developed in the future to understand this phenomenon as it grows. Similar to when the television was first introduced, not everyone was familiar with it, but as time progressed, now everyone can use a television. The expectation is that that's going to become very similar with computer technology. So as this technology advances and time progresses, more and more individuals are going to become user-friendly with it, and doing so are going to become more apt to use that medium in various different ways. This particular slide is the entire table, and as you will notice, the writing is very small, so you're not going to be able to actually read this entire table. So what we're going to do is break down each of the studies individually, and I'll cover their tradition, their context, their metatheorical approach, and then the communication theory in general. That would cover all three of our studies. This portion of the table is going to cover the article, The Writing on the Wall, a content analysis of college students' Facebook groups for the 2008 presidential election. The tradition that the authors used is the sociocultural tradition. Their research acknowledges that communication is influenced by shared social structures and cultures. The participants are college students, a shared social structure in itself. They are all enrolled at similar-sized universities in the 7 swing states that would determine the presidential election outcome. All participants associated with a political Facebook page supporting either John McCain or Barack Obama. Our textbook states, quote, "The core of sociocultural tradition suggests that individuals are parts of larger groups who have unique rules and patterns of interaction. To theorize from this tradition means to acknowledge and become sensitive to the many kinds of people who occupy this planet." The context for this research would be mass media communication. Our textbook states the following: "This communication technology includes the internet, including emailing, blogging, and instant messaging, the influence of social networking sites, cell phone usage, and digital television. For our purposes, we identify mass communication as communication to a large audience via multiple channels of communication. The mass communication context, therefore, includes both the channel and the audience." The communication being studied occurs on Facebook, a social networking site. This context includes both channel and audience, with both senders and receivers having control over content. The research focuses on the content of specific political Facebook group pages of universities chosen from the 7 swing states. Contrasting with other studies that look at candidate-to-voter interactions, this particular research study uses voter-to-voter interactions on Facebook. Another context to consider is small group communication. The text states, quote, "Communication theory centering on small groups frequently concerns the dynamic nature of small groups, including group roles, boundaries, and trust." The Facebook groups involved in this study would likely fall in this category. The metatheorical approach used was the empirical approach, as they were committed to maintaining objectivity and scientific process. Our textbook defines the positivistic or empirical approach as an approach assuming the existence of object reality and value-neutral research. They used a deductive process in their research. They analyzed their findings of the chosen Facebook pages to see if their predictions were accurate. They used the voting behavioral model, also known as the Michigan model, often used for classifying political information. They researched the data compiled off these Facebook wall posts and categorized the conversations for content. They used quantitative research by using a large participant base and reporting data in a statistical form. The research was meant to be objective, with the goal of highlighting and analyzing trends in the discussion content of these political Facebook pages. One note here is that the report states that they also incorporated qualitative research, simply because they had what was quoted as an other category that became dominant in their initial coding because 20% of the wall posts ended up fitting in this category. Finally, when discussing the communication theory, I would find this to fall in the social information processing theory. Basically, this theory rests upon the interplay among technology, relationships, and self-presentations. Online relationship development, according to the social information processing theory, states that relational participants will engage each other personally through both the words they use and also the frequency of those words. Our textbook states, quote, even without nonverbal cues, through various technologies, online relationships have the potential to be significant in people's lives. Individuals use the computer-mediated communication environment to get to know each other and use this information to form impressions of each other. Because messages travel via one primary channel, it takes longer for relationships to achieve the same level as those that are face-to-face. In some cases, online relationships may be viewed as more important than face-to-face relationships. The second study that we're going to look at was titled Social Media and Online Political Communication, the Role of Interpersonal Informational Trust and Openness. The authors used the socio-psychological tradition when researching their assertions in reference to political activities and online communication. The textbook states, quote, those who adhere to the socio-psychological tradition uphold a cause-effect model. That is, communication theory is examined from a view that holds that someone's behavior is influenced by something else, something social psychologists call a variable. The researchers consider variables in the cause-effect model influencing the behavior of citizens both off and online. They look at their perceptions of what is considered political activity, how that compares with scholars' perceptions, and how that could affect the accuracy of the research conducted. The context for this research would be mass media communication, and we've covered that in the last model as well. The study looked at participants in their online communication in reference to politics. The study was conducted in 2008 during the days immediately following the presidential election. This historical event was fresh in the minds of most of the citizens. Having political affairs at the forefront, the survey dealt with questions that could build on this fresh event and see how participants felt in reference to their own political participation, trust levels, and how actively they were engaged online. The article references scholars in the past who have noted that political activity has declined over time, noting that they are not considering online activity as political participation. The article also references on several other studies considering the correlation between online and offline attitudes. Two other authors mentioned in this article, each in their own articles reflect on the relationship. Sample illustrations include predicting that online identity reflects offline identity, and that people bring their same personalities to their online relationships as they do their offline ones. The authors used the empirical approach when conducting their research. We discussed on the last slide what that means and what the textbook defines that as. The tradition advocates the methods of using the natural sciences with the goal of constructing general laws governing human interactions. The authors here use quantitative methods in their research. They have defined a hypothesis and used deductive ideology. They conducted a random sample phone survey with their participants. They inquired through a scale system of participants' willingness to share political information and behaviors. They go on to ask questions dealing with online activities and analyze participants' responses on how they equate that activity with political participation. They also inquire about the respondents' recent media source activity as well as their degree of interest in various aspects of political campaigns. They use statistical data and they incorporate both Markova and ANCOVA to scrutinize the data for more accurate results, taking into account other variables that will affect the information collected. Statistical results were published and used variables to maintain objectivity and scientific process, again guided by the empirical approach. The communication theory, again, is tied to the social information processing theory, as we spoke about in our last slide. In this slide, we're going to look at the study Linking Dimensions of Internet Use and Civic Engagement. The authors use the cybernetic tradition in their consideration of Internet use and civic engagement. It is recognized that someone's experience and educational level can affect their online activities. The textbook states, quote, in other words, the cybernetic tradition asks us to understand that communication is not only information processing, but also that individuals enter into communication settings with different abilities in that information processing. The authors make mention of how scholars of the past took only into consideration the time spent on the internet, measured in hours, as opposed to experience with the internet, measured in years. The authors also state, quote, scholars have shown that experience with the internet is positively associated with traditional forms of civic engagement, including organizational and political involvement, social involvement, community involvement, connectivity with others, and social trust. Those more experienced with and educated about the internet are likely to use it for more than just email and informational services. The context for this research would be mass media communication. And again, we covered that 2 slides ago as to what the textbook states about that. The study looked at participants' online communication and its consideration as civic engagement. The research conducted focused on media activity, its effects, and how other phenomena is related to that activity. The article referenced scholars in the past who have studied civic engagement and how media has influenced it. The research builds on past studies of civic engagement and online activities, paying special attention to different dimensions of internet use. The author states, quote, "We pursue a more integrative view of how internet-related activities mesh with or fit with and complement other aspects of an individual's everyday life." Now, as far as the meta-theoretical approach, the authors use the empirical approach when conducting their research. Again, we defined what that was in our last 2 slides. We're looking at the researchers were striving for objectivity, using a sampling method with the questionnaires and taking into account specific demographic information and how it pertains to the collected information. Statistical results were published, paying specific attention to certain variables such as experience with the internet, using the internet for information, email, political purposes, socializing, and community-oriented goals. The authors used both qualitative and quantitative methods in their research. They have generalizations that they wish to study and use the inductive process for that research, a qualitative research method. They did not have their own hypothesis, but sought to answer a specific research question dealing with how people's use of the internet is related to their level of civic engagement. They used a questionnaire dispersed to a large number of people, 301 participants, using the public ferry system. They asked questions pertaining to the participants' online activity, their degree of comfort with the technology, and to what extent they use that technology. The researchers differentiated among the different dimensions of internet use by looking at the measures of civic participation, social participation, and membership in formal groups as independent of each other as opposed to combining them as previous studies have done. And again, our communication theory that we include this in is the social information processing theory, which again we have already covered 2 slides ago. The learning experience. The study of communications is constantly evolving. It uses numerous theories to understand, explain, and predict communication patterns and ideas. Often more than one theory is used in the process. Theories are subject to change, and new theories are likely to develop. Sometimes the theory or idea or concept comes first, then the research begins. Other times the research is conducted with questions in mind, and then a theory is developed by the information that's collected. Once research is conducted, data is evaluated, information then becomes knowledge which can support a theory or help develop it. Looking at the importance of communication theory. Our textbook states, quote, "In a broad sense, the goals of theory can include explanation, understanding, prediction, and social change. We're able to explain something because of the concepts and their relationships specified in a theory. We're able to understand something because of theoretical thinking. In addition, we're able to predict something based on the patterns suggested by a theory. Finally, we're able to affect social change or empowerment through theoretical inquiry." To summarize, many individuals consider certain online activities civic engagement. Research has shown that these activities would be primarily through social networking sites where peers have an interactive experience, unlike in the past where much of the political activity that occurred online was simply for informational purposes and not interactive. The level of someone's expertise with the internet will likely correlate to the level of their civic engagement online. The more experience one has, the more likely they will engage in political interactions online. As time progresses, communication theory will likely change to accommodate new media and its effect on civic engagement. And here are my references.